Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanasya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Mam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishta Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaurav Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama. Okay. Well, I'm happy to be amidst all of you again. So we had some couple of good festivals last week. Hope you all had a good time. So in the last class, we started the second chapter. We did up to this 7th verse. Was it just the last class? We were at verse 7, the last class. And okay, I'm just joining on my phone also. Okay. Okay, sorry, I was starting there a bit. Okay, so yes, chapter 2, verse 7. So this is the quintessential verse of Bhagavad Gita, because here everything changes for Arjuna, right? Before this, did I share my screen? Let's see if did I share that? Okay, yes. So just to refresher, what the chapter is divided into 5 parts. The first 10 verses still continue with Arjuna's indecision, and then Krishna starts speaking those verses. 2.11 to 2.30, of which we'll cover a part of that, is Jnana Yoga and Sankhya Yoga. Then is Karma Kand, Buddhi Yoga, and Sthita Pragya. What is it? So if you remember, the first chapter, there were 4 questions that Arjuna had put forth, and the 5th one is in this chapter. And Krishna systematically refutes each one of those as he goes forward in this chapter. And the link between both the chapters is that Arjuna is completely confused, and when he is confused, he takes shelter of Krishna as a guru, not as a friend anymore. And that's where the connection comes in. So the first section that we did last, we covered a major part of it. We initially give talk to Arjuna, Klebhyam Masamagama Partha. So he calls him an important, tries to just stimulate him again to get back and start fighting with just a pep talk, but Arjuna doesn't get ready to fight. And then Krishna's role turns into a friend, and then Krishna becomes serious and starts giving him the essential part of the whole of Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So we specifically read these 2 verses because these were the first 2 verses that Arjuna had started speaking. Sorry, Krishna had started speaking, and we talked about some of these words also, right? For example, in verse 2.2, Prabhupada just talks completely about the word Bhagavan, because Prabhupada wants to establish Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead right when he starts speaking. So the entire purport is all about Bhagavan, why Krishna is Bhagavan. Prabhupada quotes from Bhagavatam. We talked a bit about Anarya. So what does Aryan mean, right? So when Britishers came to India, they were really surprised by the advanced culture that India had. Their mindset was that everybody except them was
why stuff automatically does it, so people don't know, like people can't, like hackers or whatever, they can't check what you were like messaging or anything. So it's WhatsApp spot.
So yeah, so that's, we talked about Aryan, and then Aswargyam, Akirtikaram, and then comes Klebhyam. We talked about Klebhyam. Krishna calls him an important. The reason being, Krishna wanted to remind Arjuna, or actually get him into a mode of passion and anger that, he get up and fight. because he had been important for a year when he was in his when he was living in the forest, right? He was living in the forest. It seems my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully, you was able to listen to me. And then Krishna talked about Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ, and we talked about that in detail. What does Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ mean? This is the most important aspect of Bhagavad Gita, because we all are suffering with this disease called the weakness of heart. And primarily, the anarthas that we have are divided into 4 sections. Asat Krishna, desiring things other than Krishna, that is material desires. Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ, that is weakness of the heart, which comes from being duplicitous, fault-finding nature, most predominantly envy, and desiring name, fame, adoration. That's where the Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ comes. Then we had aparad, that's a significant part of anarthas. So we do aparad at multiple levels. We do aparad to the holy name, we do aparad in service, we do aparad to other Vaishnavas, we do aparad to ourselves also. So then comes the Brahma, Swarup Brahma. So Brahma, as we know, is an illusion, a misconception. Illusion about ourselves, what is my original position, illusion about Krishna's original position, illusion about what is this process of bhakti and how do we achieve Krishna, and then illusion regarding things that are unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. I don't realize what things are unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. So all these are Brahma. So these are the anarthas that overall, this is the whole package of anarthas that we are carrying in our hearts. And Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ is the main important one. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in one of his journals, he used to write a journal called Toshini, and in one of his editions, he mentions that how envy includes everything. Right? It includes all the other 5 vices: lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride, and then comes envy. So these are 6 vices, and envy includes all 5 of them. That is why envy is the worst of them. So that's Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ that we talked about. Okay, so now let me go back to the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So we are at verse number 7. That's what we discussed last time, right? So if Prabhupada starts right away by telling us that by nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. So what it means is that to be perplexed in this material world is natural for a living entity, because this material world is not the place meant for the living entity. This is not my home. That is why everything seems so hard for me. Nothing gives me pleasure. Whatever seems like pleasure is just a temporary cessation of misery. That's all. There is no happiness or pleasure in this world. If for a minute it's just like we are drowning, and for a second I'm able to bring my mouth out and breathe for a second. That's what the situation is for all of us. But it's we are being illusioned to think that that's happiness. Material activities are a source of perplexity for everyone. So that's the problem. That's the basic essence here. Okay. So the despair and the frustration, that is, as I was saying, that's an indication of our higher nature. That is why I'm dissatisfied. Sense of dissatisfaction means that I'm repeating myself. So we are never in harmony with this world. And just to be aware of this fact that I am not in sync with this material world, and the energy around me is bound to be perplexing, is a very, very practical step towards detachment and being satisfied. Okay? And we will see more about that. This particular section or the entire Bhagavad Gita for Krishna at multiple points brings out the concept of tolerance. And we'll talk about tolerance a bit more. And we'll go into, well, actually, we should discuss it here, because tolerance is an important part of bhakti. To move forward in bhakti, we need to be tolerant. And we will see why and how and where to be tolerant, where not to be tolerant. We'll discuss that. So I'm not, when I realize that this energy is perplexing, I stop identifying with it. Or at least I get to know that this is not the right place for it. Right. So then this verse, 7th verse, Prabhupada talks about also the concept of guru, right? That's what Arjuna is doing at this point. So Guru and Bhagavad Gita, that has a position of a control room, right, in the airport. We fly our own airplanes, but we always stay in touch with the control room. Right? The control room provides us proper feedback and it helps us navigate through our lives. Right? So what does the job description of a guru include? Guru and Bhagavad Gita. So Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. Those are the three lifelines that we have. Okay. So what is that? Or what is their sorry, I get distracted whenever it shows up that somebody. So yes, so Guru, Sadhu,
Your voice is breaking in between.
Yes.
I don't know what you're saying.
Yes, right. So the three different things that these the job description of Guru, Sadhu, guys, I can always I have lots of options, and then I pick up the best out of them. So I can always do that with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, right? And then they help us navigate on course that keeps us guiding. So there's a verse in the Bhagavatam which says that Nirdeham Adhyam Sulabham Sudurlabham Labham Sukalpam Guru Karnadharam Mayanukulena Bhasvaterita Puman Bhavabdim Nataret Satma. So what the verse in essence says that Guru Karnadharam. So if your body's ship, the Guru is he's the captain of the ship. So, and then the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, they are like the favorable winds that push the ship forward. And the person who doesn't take advantage of these virtues, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, is very much killing himself, killing the soul. He's called the killer of the soul. Yes, killing the soul. Yes. So in essence, this verse is telling us that we have to surrender. So now in this verse, 7th verse, it's Karpanya. So Karpanya means miserly weakness. So Arjuna has been referred to as weak earlier on in that. In this verses 2.2 and 3, Krishna calls him an Arya and a Kirtikaram and whatnot. But now he's accepting that he is miserly. He's weak, right? And as I was saying, Prabhupada, in this purport, he brings out the word perplexity 10 different times. So that's what it shows, that how perplexing this material world is for us, and we can only get through it by taking a spiritual teaching. That's the only purpose. That's the only way we can do it, right? Okay. So this particular purport is divided into three parts. There are three paragraphs. So the first paragraph, as the first sentence itself tells us, that there's a problem everywhere. Second one is that I cannot see the problem because I have not realized it. Whenever we want to solve a problem, the first thing that we have is that we should realize that we have a problem. Otherwise, I'll never be able to solve it. So first step is realizing, and then we meditate upon it. Then comes we physically solve that problem. So that's the first step. So then Prabhupada in the second paragraph, he talks about that how who's a Karpanya and who's a Brahmana. Who's a Brahmana? Like who's a Karpanya, who's a Brahmana? Karpanya is one who's miserly, who doesn't want to solve the problems of life. But then the other part, the person who has this defined finer consciousness, that person is able to solve the problems of his life by taking a guru. Right? And then the third paragraph comes that it talks about an intelligent person, the Brahmana, right? Who knows what the problem is, and he or she is putting in effort efforts to solve the problem. Right? So we always say that the guru knows everything, right? We always say that. Prabhupada was throughout his life, he always used to say that, you know, he wouldn't necessarily claim omniscience, but then, you know, a guru knows everything. What does that mean? It means that a guru has full understanding of the three fundamental concepts of this world, of this material creation, which is the three J's: Jiva, Jagat, and Jagdish. So if a guru, he knows all these three aspects of Jiva, Jagat, and Jagdish, then he has the complete essential knowledge, in which is also given in Bhagavad Gita, right? So once when we know Krishna, then we know the ultimate purpose of everything. Right? Obviously, it doesn't mean that if the guru is all-knowing, he will be able to fix the computer, or he'll be able to diagnose himself or cure himself. That's not what it means. It just means that he has a complete understanding of this material creation and how this material world is functioning. And that is why that person can help us, right? This is a very closed environment that we are living in, and we can't fix everything in this closed environment. Somebody who has transcended this closed environment can fix it, can help us come out of it. We cannot come out by ourselves. That's the guru. Okay. So, and the mood of Bhagavad Gita is, it's not, surrender does not mean you give up your intelligence also. Surrender means surrendering with intelligence. Okay? So that's what it means. So we have to surrender to Guru to overcome perplexity. Obviously, Guru is not meant to help us reduce our blood pressure or all that sort of nonsense things. Guru is meant for the higher problems in life. So a Guru can remove the gross ignorance of a disciple, and which the Guru does by giving Atma Tattva. So as I mentioned in the first chapter, that Dehatma Buddhi is the problem, that I think I am this body. Right? Whereas the problem can be solved by the Guru, who will tell us what Atma Tattva is, what is my true nature. Right? Prabhupada was doing a lecture. I think it was Russia. The university he was talking in, so you can expect there were some high people in the audience. One of the professors after the class, and he asked Prabhupada, if I am not my body, whose body am I? I was really very it just shows how deep in ignorance are we, that the only thing that I can think of is a body. So if I'm not my body, then whose body am I? That was a question that was asked to that person, right? So the Guru has a very integral part in our lives. Without a Guru, it doesn't mean, like Krishna, some people might come to say, for example, right, we say that by chanting we can achieve everything. So then somebody might come and ask you that, okay, if chanting we can achieve everything, then why should I take a guru, take initiation? So there's no doubt about that. But we need somebody who has walked this path. Otherwise, the path becomes very, very difficult if we try to handle it by ourselves. That's why we need a guru. This is to tell you a short story that in teenage years, he wanted to become a taekwondo expert. Okay. But the problem the boy had that he didn't have a left hand. Okay. So he was going from one monastery to another looking for a sensei. Sensei is a teacher, a martial art. Nobody was ready to take him, because the moment they saw him that, okay, he doesn't have a left hand, they said, oh, you're not able to learn it. But the boy was really adamant. He wanted to learn. He wanted to learn the art of taekwondo. So then there was one monastery that he had heard, which was far off up in the mountains, and he had heard that the teacher was excellent and the teacher might take him. So he goes and sits at the door of the monastery. So it was nearly evening, the door doesn't open up. He tries knocking on the door, it doesn't open up. The next morning, the door opens, an old man comes to sweep the front
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, your voice is
of the
breaking.
door.
Sorry.
The old man sweeps and leaves. Sweeps and leaves.
Prabhuji?
My voice is breaking. My internet connection. Oh, you cannot hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji, it's coming and going. It's just so lagging.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji. So many points we are missing in like breaking. We cannot understand it clearly.
Just give me a second. I have a fan on in the background. Sometimes that interferes. Tell me if it's better now. If it's any better now.
I
No?
think
We can hear, but actually when you are talking continuously, it's breaking, Prabhuji.
Let me see if I
Right now,
remove my
maybe
headphones.
we can try, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Let me just see. One second. Does it get any better now? Anything?
yes, Prabhuji, it's much better now.
It's much better. Okay, let's try it. Give me listen to me for a minute or two. If it doesn't work, tell me. I'll remove the headphones and try to speak direct on the computer speakers and mic.
Sure, Prabhuji.
If you let me know. Okay. So I was telling you the story of this sensei and the student. I'll go back and start it again. It's an interesting story. So what happens is that there was this boy who didn't have a left hand, but he was really adamant in taekwondo. Somebody tells him of a monastery far up in the mountains where the teacher is very where the teacher is might take him. So he goes to that monastery, he sits in the front of the door. It was late in the evening, nobody opens up. And the next morning, an old man opens up the door, and then he just comes out, just sweeps the front of the door, and then goes back in. Another day passes. Again, next morning, the old man comes out of the door, sweeps the front, and leaves.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, your voice is not that clear.
They pick up the boy and take him in. And they take him in front of the head of that monastery, who is that old man who was coming out to sweep. And so this boy, he presents his thought that he said, I want to learn. Okay. Okay. Just give me 1 second.
Prabhuji, can you try switching off your video and use only audio?
Okay, I removed my phones and I'm going to speak right through the mic. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Prabhu, but maybe
you all hear me?
try switching off your video so it'll use less bandwidth, Prabhu.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Prabhu. We can
Yes,
hear you.
Prabhuji.
Okay, so let me share my screen again, and let's see if I'm better. I removed my headphones. Probably a lot of things running simultaneously. My son is also doing a class downstairs, so might be just too much load on the internet connection. So yes. Okay, so I'll start the story again. Hopefully, this time you're able to listen to me. Let me know if my voice doesn't remain steady. We'll figure something else out. Okay, so the story I was telling you about was about this sensei, a teacher, and a student who wanted to learn martial arts. And he wanted to learn martial arts. He went from one monastery to another. Nobody took him because he didn't have a left hand. But then somebody told him of this monastery up in the mountains where the leader of that monastery might accept him. He goes and sits at the door for 2 days. Nobody takes him in. Just an old man comes out every morning, cleans in front of the door, and goes back in. After sitting there for 2 long days, the kid, somebody comes and picks him up. Somebody comes and picks up the child and takes him in. And when he is in, he's put forth in front of that same old man who's the one who clean in front of the door. So that's where so then he's taken inside, and then the teacher, the child tells the teacher that, I want to learn martial arts, and the teacher said, but you don't have a left hand. So but the teacher then still accepts him. Teacher accepts him and says that, okay, I will accept you.
Poops. A good poop. So
If you can please, everybody can mute themselves.
we'll clean and took it out.
Okay. Yeah. So what the teacher says to him is that all you have to do is just listen to me, not ask me any questions. Okay. And so the student says, okay, and the teacher just teaches him a single move. That's all the teacher does. And he tells this student, the one without a left hand, he says, you just keep practicing this one move. And the student, being an obedient student, he just says, okay, I'll do that. So a month passes, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year passes away. And the student is still learning the same one move. Whereas all his peers, they are learning many different moves. And the student was perplexed, but he didn't ask his teacher any question. He just said, okay, my teacher told me, I believe him. Then comes this annual competition where people from all over the world get together. And so the student goes into that competition, the student without a left hand, he goes in there. And the student, he goes into the initial, then he goes to the semifinals, quarterfinals, and then he eventually reaches the final. And now everybody is so amazed at that this is the first time ever in the history of the game that for somebody without the left hand has come into the game, he's taken part first of all, and then he's been winning. So he comes to this final of the game, and there he's going to fight against the reigning champion. And this student was really perplexed. He said, I don't know what to do. My guru hasn't taught me anything else, right? So my guru has only taught me a single move. And he was really perplexed. How am I going to win this? And then the game starts, and one move, and the other person is defeated. And now this student is so much in perplexity. I don't know what's going on here. Everybody's cheering for him. Everybody's amazed at how could a person without his left hand win the game. And the student is crying. He goes and he pays his obeisances to his teacher, and he asks his teacher, what is going on here? I don't know what happened to this in this whole game. You only taught me one move, and for some reason I kept on winning. And then the teacher tells him that the move that I taught you, the counter to that move is that the other person has to hold your left hand for that. And now you don't have a left hand, so nobody could even counter that move of yours. That's why you just kept winning. So then now the student really starts crying, and he realizes that how his teacher whom he was doubting earlier, had given him exactly what he was looking for. Right? That one move made him win throughout the competition and all the way to the final. Just because the teacher knew that because he doesn't have a left hand, he taught him the move where the opposite party has to use this person's left hand to counter that move. And because he didn't have a left hand, nobody could counter this move, and he kept on winning. So before I say it, I would like to know, what do you think is the message coming out of this story in context of the guru concept that we are reading right now? I hope everybody heard the story this time.
I think full surrender is of utmost importance, Prabhu.
That's a good point. Yes, full surrender. That's what most important. What else? Come on, people, please work with me. Please work with me. There's so many messages coming out of this story. Anything else that stood out for you?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Guru knows what we need.
Yeah, Guru knows what we need. Yes. Something else? Anything else that piqued your interest?
Prabhu, is it that we should have the faith and Guru and Shastra?
Yeah, undying faith is necessary. Well, two things. I'll get to it. Perseverance, right? If you get a good instruction from superiors, you apply that in your life, even if it is one single instruction that as the student got. So perseverance. So yes, that's connected to the undying faith. An important one that I realized when I heard the story was that the Guru knows how to turn our handicap to an asset. Right? The boy didn't have a left hand. The Guru taught him a move wherein he could even use that to his advantage, not having a left hand. Right? Helps us. So our Guru, even though we have so many handicaps, the Guru can help us become a better person. Right? Just like Prabhupada, right? Just imagine Prabhupada, when Prabhupada came here, he met hippies. Right? All the hippies known about was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, as they call it. Right? There's a book by Guru Das Prabhu. There's a book. It's actually known as Love, Medicine, and Music. But then there's a, if you look at the cover, there's a flip side name which says sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So that's all the hippies knew about, right? So what Prabhupada did, he always saw a spark, and he fanned that spark. That's the beauty of Prabhupada, and that's the beauty. That's the oceanic intelligence of Prabhupada. How he used it in Krishna's service. It's amazing, right? So what did Prabhupada do? Right? Okay. Hippies were what were hippies doing? Hippies were seeking pleasure beyond matter, right? They were ready to give up all the material things. They didn't want their parents' money and all that stuff. And they were looking for something beyond, but didn't know how to find it, where to find it, right? So hippies, in one sense, were renounced, right? And Prabhupada introduced them to Krishna. But how did Prabhupada introduce them is the amazing thing. Now, if you remember, if you think of a hippie, the image that will come to your mind is there's this colorfully dressed person. He will be having colorful beads and wearing, and some fancy colored pants, and he'll be just singing around as if carefree. Have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, depending on that. And so Prabhupada introduced Krishna in the same way. He presented Krishna as a fascinating god for them. Why? Krishna is a musician, just like all the hippies. Krishna, he wears a saffron-colored, dress. I just imagine, have you ever seen anybody wearing a saffron-colored pants? How weird that would look. I remember many years ago there was a movie, a Hindi movie, where the actor wore that, and I know it became a fashion. But then you don't generally wear those kind of pants anymore, right? Krishna has a girlfriend, many girlfriends, whom he's just playing around with, frolicking around, nothing to do. He's a musician. He's blue-colored. He wears a lot of these colorful beads on his neck. He's in the forest. He's wearing a peacock feather, right? So hippies found Krishna to be a bona fide hippie guru. That's the way Prabhupada presented Krishna to everybody there, right? So they all saw that, okay, this is our God, you know, he is exactly like us. He's a hippie like us. And that's how they connected together, right? So, so Prabhupada, he brought Krishna to a level where the hippies could understand and accept it. And what was the outcome? They were all intoxicated by a spiritual culture, right? So Prabhupada took all that, which the whole world thought was a disadvantage, and he converted to an advantage for all the hippies. That's what a guru does. That's what the message I was saying was that a guru knows how to turn a handicap into an asset. Okay. Sometimes you might have heard this story. Sometimes these hippies used to take Prabhupada to these unknown places. You know, Prabhupada didn't know where he was being taken. And so one day they took Prabhupada to a farm community. So Prabhupada went and sat there. He closed his eyes when people were just coming in and started thinking Radha Madhav. And he finishes Radha Madhav, he opens his eyes and sees that all of them are nude. All of them are naked sitting. It's a nude colony actually, it was a nude community. Men, women, everybody knew, right? So just imagine what havoc it creates to our senses if somebody like me goes and sits in a place like that. I'll be just blown out. But what did Prabhupada do, right? Prabhupada started by saying that you all have experienced that when you take off your clothes and enjoy with your senses, how much pleasure is there? And they all were agreeing, yes, 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 we have seen it. That's why we roam about without any clothes. So Prabhupada said the next statement Prabhupada made, so just imagine how much pleasure will there be if you realize your true senses even beyond this body, right? And they were just blown off by that. In Leela Amrita, Prabhupada's Leela Amrita, the story is there. And it says that so many of them just packed up and walked with Prabhupada. So many of those people there. Right? This is how Prabhupada preached and created a revolution. What the world's strongest country, you know, United States of America is supposedly, or at least it used to be in the 70s, the strongest country in the world with the strongest army, best politicians, you know, all the brain, best governance systems. What they couldn't do, a 70-year-old Indian man could do. That's the strength of a guru. So I just wanted to stress on this point because this is the quintessential verse of Bhagavad Gita. This is where everything starts. Surrender to a guru. That's where the whole process starts and kicks off. Okay. Yeah. So that's the 7th verse. I'll now jump on to the 8th verse. Any thoughts anybody has before I move? Well, I move on to the 8th verse. Okay, so coming to the 8th verse now. So which is, it says, I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it, even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. So now Arjuna is saying it's drying up his indriyas. So sometimes when we are in stress, we have a lot of tension, our stomach gets weird, right? You all must have felt it at some point or the other. When our emotions are very, very intense, our body physically starts demonstrating or exhibiting the stress, the anxiety that we have. Right? Many times we lose sleep over anxiety, blood pressure, cardiac disorders and whatnot. Right? So that's what now Arjuna is exhibiting. So he's dreaming of a Rajya like the demigods. Right? He's saying demigods in heaven. So he's now thinking that I will, if I win a prosperous on earth, no, I will not be able to dispel the grief that he's having, even if he wins the kingdom like the demigods of heaven. Right? So he's in that mindset that, oh, you know, give me anything, but then I wouldn't accept it. I would just, that's not for me. Right? So we all live in a two-dimensional world, right? There's spiritual aspect and there's a material aspect. In the material aspect, again, there is an emotional and a physical aspect, right? So what Arjuna is saying is that he's been tormented emotionally and physical gratification cannot solve the problem. but then still he's on the material plane. As I said, right? Spiritual, material, 2 dimensions of our life. Then the material has further 2 dimensions, which is emotional and physical. And that's what he's just talking about right now. He's emotionally tormented and physical gratification won't help him, right? So emotions, as long as they are connected to material, they will always be a problem. Only when we connect those emotions to Krishna, then only true happiness happens. Right? So that's the essence of this verse, right? So in the previous verse, Arjun, the 7th verse we read, Arjun had surrendered to Krishna, right? And Krishna was like, before the 7th verse, Krishna was like, yeah, you know everything. You're acting like a smart dude. You go and figure it out yourself, Arjun. Right? You know all the Shastras. You've read everything. You've quoted Vedas and whatnot. So you go and figure it out yourself. Right? I gave you a pep talk, and you smashed it around. Krishna told us 2.2 and 2.3 verse was just a pep talk from Krishna. So till then, Krishna stops again after 2.2 and 2.3 because he sees that Arjun is bashing around his pep talk. Krishna stops speaking there. It's only when there was only one thing that was missing in Arjun's comments before verse 7, right? So that was his surrender. So, and that's what is needed for Krishna to reciprocate. Before that, Krishna might help us. Well, Krishna is helping us 24/7. He's giving us everything for free. But then the real help only comes when we surrender, right? So Arjun has kind of given the essence here now that I'm not. So what Krishna thought that, I gave him a pep talk. He just thrashed it around. If I give him some more knowledge, he will probably use it for his material gains. So I won't speak about it. But then Arjun is stressing that no, now I'm actually looking for transcendental knowledge. So that's the important part in this verse, right? Anything Prabhupada talks about this in the purport. There's a sentence there highlighted. Yes. So academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, etc., are all useless in solving the problems of life. Help can be given only by a spiritual master like Krishna, right? So just imagine that in my heart, I have a hole that is in the shape of Krishna. Okay, so your heart has a Krishna-shaped hole. Just imagine that. I have been trying to fill up with many different things. Fill my stomach with food, fill my mind with a lot of material knowledge, fill my bank with money, fill my racks at home with degrees, with awards, all that stuff. I've been doing all of that, but then all of that has been useless in helping me get rid of the perplexity and grief that I was always facing all the time. That can only be filled by Krishna, because I'm trying to fit into my heart things that don't fit in there, right? When small kids, when they're 2 or 3, you just to teach them shapes, etc. You give them those, that shapes. There's a design, right? That only that particular shape will fit in. If it's a triangle, it will fit in the triangle. A square in a square. And the kid, because the child doesn't know what the different shapes are, so the kid tries to fit the triangle in a square or a square in a circle, and that never happens. So it's the same thing is what we are doing. So I've been trying to fill my Krishna-shaped hole in my heart with so many different aspects: knowledge, scholarship, position, and worst of it, I've been trying to fill it up with it. That's the essence of this particular verse. So Arjun has everything of all that, right? He has knowledge. He's the best archer in the world. He's been quoting Shastra right and left. He's physically, he's very he's got a beautiful body. He's like a demigod, and he's aristocratic relatives. He has everything. Despite all that, he couldn't solve his friends. Similarly, in our lives, we have these checkmate problems that come to us, and nothing will help us. And you all are at a position, I'm sure you must have felt this. beyond feeling, we have to acknowledge it and realize it. And then we can solve the problem. That's the essence of this verse 8.1. So let's go to ninth one. So now here Sanjay is demonstrating or is explaining to Dhritarashtra what he's seen at the battlefield. Having spoken thus, Arjun, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight. And he fell silent. Okay. So this must have been a good point where Dhritarashtra must be very happy. Okay, Arjun has given up. There's not going to be any war. My son will be the king. But then Prabhupada is telling us that Sanjay disappointed him again in relating that Arjun was competent to kill his enemy. Parantapa. He uses the word Parantapa for him. And also the word Gudakesha. Both these words are that Gudakesha, we talked about it earlier on, that Gudakesha means one who has overcome illusion. And in a literal sense, it means one who has overcome sleep. So Arjun had done both of them. And that is why he was called Gudakesha. And then Parantapa, that he was competent to kill his enemy. So Sanjay was taking this moment to deflate the false hopes that Dhritarashtra might be having. Okay. So next verse. Okay. Before that, let me highlight this section. False lamentation. Yes. So what is false lamentation? Prabhupada is talking about that. So can lamentation also be spiritual? This is a question for all of you. Can lamentation be spiritual also? Prabhupada is talking about false lamentation. Can everybody still hear me? Oh, did I lose all of you? I can't hear anybody. Can
No, we're here. We're here.
Okay. That scared me. Okay. Okay, you're here. Okay. So my question, yes, can lamentation be spiritual also? Anybody? Give it a try. We're discussing. We're not experts here. I'm not an authority. We're trying to understand Bhagavad Gita to the best of our capacity. Give it a shot. No, nobody wants to take that. Okay. We'll talk more about it when we come to the next devotion. Says somebody had something to say?
I would say no, Prabhu, it's not.
It's not? Okay. So when we come to nectar of devotion, we'll see that lamentation can also be an expression of love for Krishna. And there are many of these incidences in Bhagavatam. That is why when we read Srimad Bhagavatam talks of every single psychological condition that I will go through. Envy of Chitraketu's wives, right? The helplessness of Gajendra, the elephant, the pride of Hiranyakashipu, right? The renunciation of Sukadev Goswami. Every single psychological condition you go through in this life, Bhagavatam talks about it. That's the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. So lamentation is an expression of service to Krishna, as a love for Krishna. When Brahma, in the Brahma Moha Leela, when he takes away all the cowherd friends of Krishna, and then when he comes back, he sees that all his friends are still there. And he knows that I have taken all of them and put them in a cave. But then when he comes back, he sees that, oh, Krishna he's playing with his friends. So Brahma was lamenting after committing a mistake of taking away the cowherd friends of Krishna. When Krishna was fighting Kaliya, Mother Yashoda exclaimed, right, oh my God, my son is now entrapped within the hoods of this Kaliya snake, right? And so that is an instance of lamentation in ecstatic love. And when Prabhupada was leaving his body, he said that na shochati na kamshati. This particular phrase comes in many of these verses. The person never laments. But then later on, when he pondered and thought about it, he said that my only lamentation is that I could not establish Varnashram. So that's a lamentation in service of Krishna. So that's why Prabhupada is using this phrase, false lamentation, because it also can exist in the spiritual realm. We could have a spiritual lamentation also. And as I said, we'll talk of all these emotions when we come to Nectar of Devotion. I'm not sure if we'll talk about it. Let's see. Okay. So let's move on to verse number 10. Please feel free to stop me if you have any thoughts, you want to share any comments or any questions. 10th one. Okay, so we are at 10 now. O descendant of Bharat, at that time Krishna, smiling in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. So here is still continuation of Sanjay speaking. Prabhupada, I've highlighted this section. It appears that the talk between the master and the disciple were openly exchanged in the presence of both armies, so that all were benefited. So the talks of Bhagavad Gita are not for any particular person, society, or community, but they are for all, and friends or enemies are equally entitled to hear them. And for this very reason, we go out and distribute books. We go out and distribute Bhagavad Gitas to everybody, irrespective of caste, creed, sexual orientation, gender, everything. We give it to everybody because the book is meant for everybody. When Krishna didn't do that discrimination, why should we do that? Right? And this is it's called this verse is a sandhi, it's a rasa sandhi shloka. What it means is that it brings two rasas together, right? First, it was friendly, right? Arjuna was in a friendly mood, and Krishna was thinking that, oh, here's my poor friend, what is going to happen to him? And then now the friend is suddenly becoming student. So now Krishna smiles, right? Krishna is an expert at playing any role perfectly. So that's why it's called a rasa sandhi shloka. So it brings out two rasas. One of friendliness, which Arjuna was having earlier, and now it has transitioned to a very serious relationship of a teacher and a disciple. So that those both are brought here in this particular shloka, right? So the word Bharat, the descendant of Bharat, is referring to Dhritarashtra, right? So that's also one thing. So now, why is Krishna smiling here? Is a question that we can ask, right? Why is Krishna smiling? His friend is going through a nightmare here, and Krishna is smiling here, right? So actually, Arjuna is lamenting, right? So we all know that there's a lot of lamentation going on in Arjuna's part. So Krishna is smiling because he knows that Arjuna is behaving in a very unbecoming way, right? So whenever in Mahabharata, whenever any of Krishna's friends become unbecoming and start acting this weird way, Krishna starts teasing them, right? When in the last year of their when they were in the forest, is somebody speaking? So when in the last year of their exile in the forest, they had to live incognito. And when that was towards the end, Krishna comes to meet them, and Krishna says that, you know, Krishna is talking to all of them, and Bhima was excited. He says, yes, I'm ready for the war. You know, I'll kill all of them. I'll tear them to pieces. Right. So, but then when later on, Krishna is ready to go as a mediator, the Shanti Dut, if he could bring peace, that was their last try. Bhima was like, yeah, Krishna, please try for peace. And at that time, Krishna starts teasing Bhima. He says, Bhima, I didn't expect this from you, right? All the 14 years you have been screaming your lungs out saying that, oh, once this is over, I'm going to kill Duryodhan and his brother, Dushashan, I'll tear open his chest and drink his blood and so on and so forth. And now suddenly you become, you're like a whiny kid. You know? He says, oh, so Krishna teases his close ones. So that's what Krishna is doing here. That is why he's smiling, right? So when he has incited Bhima, then Bhima becomes angry again. He says, I'm not a coward. I will fight. I'm not afraid of any bloodshed. So because Krishna is in a Sakya Ras, in a mode of friendship with the Pandavas, he has a tendency to laugh at his friends. So when Arjuna is saying, I can't fight, that's why Krishna starts laughing. And then, but now because we are also seeing that Arjuna has surrendered to him, so now Krishna will start talking to him about these stories. Right? We all go through this in our lives. Krishna continues to speak to all of us, right? Krishna is whenever, our intelligence, there is a, how would you say that? Between a stimulation that hits us and the response that we give, the reflex action, there is a tiny period of time wherein we can think and define our reaction. And that's where our intelligence lies. So when you keep on doing bhakti over and over for long and long periods of time, that time period between the stimulation coming and hitting you and you reflecting on that, when you're responding to it, the time expands. And your intelligence gets a lot more time to respond to that. And that is why senior devotees who have been practicing, they don't respond to these tiny ebbs and flows that happen in their lives, because now the intelligence is so much fortified that it can define how it wants to respond to a situation. And that response is also dependent on whether it's going to help them with their bhakti or not. Right? So we all go through this in our lives. Krishna continues to speak to us, right? But the only thing that is needed is surrender. I have to open up myself for that instruction. The rain falls all over the world. It falls on a barren land, nothing happens. It falls on a fertile land, beautiful flowers, crops come out of it. So, right, if we keep our heart and mind open, when the right time comes, Krishna will tell us, do this, don't do that, accept this, don't even think of that. That's what Krishna does. Right? So that's the significance here. And now Krishna, another thing that Prabhupada is highlighting here, that Bhagavad Gita was openly spoken. It was open, it was in a public view that was spoken. That means that it was for everybody. Right? So everybody could see that there was a serious discussion going on. And Krishna also gave this opportunity to Dhritarashtra to hear. Right? There was a chance for Dhritarashtra to redeem himself. So if you notice that in Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra was not as bad as Duryodhana. But then he had Hridaya-dohaṁ. He was weakness of heart, that me and mine, aham mameti, my sons, right? The first verse. What did my sons and the sons of Pandu, all that stuff. So we have to keep ourselves open. And what it means in a philosophical sense, that what Krishna was speaking is available to everybody. It means that Krishna can speak from whatever distance he wants to. But then if I have if I'm ready to listen, then because Krishna is sitting in my heart, I'll be able to listen it also. Right? So that's also a philosophical way of looking at it, what Prabhupada means here, that it was for everybody. Whoever had their heart open, they could listen and imbibe that knowledge. But unfortunately, for somebody like Dhritarashtra, who has his heart closed, who was so much engrossed in his sense gratification, that even though he heard the whole Bhagavad Gita, he couldn't take any essence out of it. So now all of us, we are reading it. 5,000 some years, 5,115, 20 some years have passed in Kali Yuga. Those many years have passed of Bhagavad Gita being spoken, and here we are reading it, it's as fresh as ever. Because we have voluntarily made this choice that yes, I want to hear. I have opened myself up. That's what is the essence of this particular verse here. Okay, now comes Krishna starts speaking. Right? Here, now we'll see that. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, so we covered it. We're going to talk about. Okay, I had this theme of section here. So this is most like the theme of the section, and as we go on, we will cover these. But primarily, Sankhya Yoga is being discussed in this section, and Sankhya means to understand the difference between spirit and matter through an analytical study. Right? That is why Krishna goes into a lot of detail telling what is the soul. That soul cannot be cut, cannot be dried, cannot be burned. Give all those details, and then so that's what Sankhya Yoga means. And if we have time today, I'll probably go on to the next slide and talk about what Sankhya Yoga in detail is. So coming to this verse, this is 11th verse. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Okay, now we are beginning Bhagavad Gita. Till now it was Duryodhan Gita, Arjun Gita, whatever you may call it. But now is the Gita Krishna is going to speak. Krishna was just hearing Arjun go on and on about his enjoyment, fear, so and so forth. Now Krishna will begin Sankhya Yoga, analytical study of matter and spirit, as it says. Right? In this concept, what we are trying to do is we are going to separate this material body and all these elements that this material body is made up of, separate from the soul, that is my true nature. There's a verse in the 7th chapter, the 4th verse. Bhumi rapo nalo vayu khammano buddhi revacha ahankara iti ante bhinna prakar ashtada. Apare me vitastu anya prakriti viddhi me param jeev bhuta mahabaho yahidam dharete jagat. So Krishna in these two verses 7.4 and 5 tells us that there are 8 elements, material elements, which are the lower inferior energy. And then above them is aparemya. Beyond that is itastvanya, prakriti viddhi me param, jiva bhuta. That is the living entity, that is me. And that's what we are going to do in this particular section, is separate those two things out. Once Prabhupada went to an American school in America, and he was to teach to these, probably I think they were 7th or 8th graders, so probably it might be like something like that. And now he was supposed to teach them about soul. Now just imagine, how do you teach somebody probably 10 years old or so, somewhere close to that age, about soul? So Prabhupada asked one of the students to volunteer and come in front. And then that kid came, and Prabhupada started asking, okay, now tell me, where is your hand? Okay, so the boy pointed to his hand. Then where's your eyes? Where's your nose? And then lastly, Prabhupada asked the boy, now where are you? And the boy didn't know, what do you mean by that? Where am I? And then I think the boy put his hand on his heart, but then the boy didn't know, right? So we say my body. We don't say I body. It's my body. So what that means is that I'm separate from this. We all have this intuitional feeling. Intuitional? I think that's the word. We all have this intuition that I'm not this body, but I can't grasp it. Right? So when we get late, what we say, that the car's tire punctured. Right? So what? No, we don't say that. What we say is that I had a punctured tire. I didn't have a punctured tire. My tire didn't puncture. It was my car that had a punctured tire. But then I would generally say, oh, I had a punctured tire. Why? Because I'm identifying myself with that car. Right? We talked about it last, I think last time was in the last class or last topic, that you all have come to the temple, you all have your cars parked outside, and then you hear a big bang as if somebody has come and hit another car, and suddenly your heart starts beating faster, and you think, oh my God, my car, what happened to it? And you go out and you see it, it's not my car, it's somebody else's. That your worries go. Why? Because we have identified ourselves with the car. So, and that identification is so strong that whenever anything happens to this body, we get perplexed, we get bewildered. When I get very strongly attached with my car, then comes ahankar. You see, attachment to our car brings ahankar. If you want to remember this concept of thinking, don't get attached to anything, because that results to, it fires the false ego. It fans the fire of false ego. That's what it does. Right? This is how we go through sukha, dukkha, man, apaman, right? Happiness, sorrow, respect, disrespect. This is all duality in the world. But the moment I realize that I'm not this body, all that duality goes away, and there's nothing for me to worry about. So that's why this section is of Atma Tattva, knowledge of the self. Who am I? Right? So up till here, it's whenever there's a perplexity, we heard that whenever there's perplexity, we approach it. And what is Guru did, we talked about those 3 things. So that's what it is. Okay. So now I'll let you move on to the next slide that I had here. Give me 1 second. This I wanted to put here. Okay, Sankhya Yoga. So now Sankhya Yoga is of two types. You will see this across Prabhupada's books, and then so you will see that Sankhya Yoga is also taught by Kapila Muni, who is the son of Devahuti and Kardama Muni in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And he's teaching Sankhya Yoga, which is about detaching from this matter through analytical study and searching out Krishna within our heart. But then more recently, there was another Sankhya philosophy that was propagated by another Kapila, but he was an atheist. So what he was saying was just analyze the material elements, something similar to what scientists are doing nowadays. That's what that Sankhya philosophy taught. So what we are going to focus on is the Sankhya philosophy taught by Kapila Dev, also taught by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. And what does this Sankhya philosophy do? I've written 4 bullet points there, and we can talk more about tolerance, but you'll notice that tolerance is the first and the foremost quality of a devotee. I put this verse here, which comes in the 3rd canto, is spoken by Kapila. Titikshava. Titikshava means tolerance. So the first and the foremost quality of a devotee is tolerance. And all these things, Sankhya Yoga, it will get rid of the Hridaya Daurbalyam we talked about. It will strengthen our foundation in Bhakti by giving us a very clear mind and a very fortified intelligence, right? So now somebody can ask you that why is Krishna talking about Sankhya right in the beginning, right? The first thing is, first and foremost of the concepts of Bhagavad Gita is that if I am not convinced that I am a body, then everything else you will read from here is a waste of time. And when I say convinced, I don't mean that, oh, you are fully renounced. No, at least theoretically, you have this understanding that I am not this body. Yes, it has not seeped deep into my consciousness yet. I've not fully realized it. But I have at least accepted it that on a theoretical basis that, okay, yes, I am not my body. Let me keep this fact in my mind, even though I have not fully realized it, but let me keep it in my mind, right? But if I'm not convinced that I'm not this body, then I'm wasting my time. Then I should just go back and enjoy my life, king size, dog size, whatever size I'm living in, whatever there are billions of living entities living. There's no use of this discussion. And that's why Krishna brings this out right in the beginning. Okay, this knowledge awards tolerance, I talked about, right? So that's one of the most important, the most wonderful qualities to deal with this nature. This material nature is designed to frustrate every single endeavor we have, right? And it's daunting to face these material problems. So tolerance is a very, very important quality in oops, sorry, I lost my screen for a second. Okay, yes. So tolerance is the most important quality that we have. We need. So let's spend some time on this tolerance thing, and please let me know what your thoughts are. But so if you look at the definition of tolerance, what does tolerance mean, right? So tolerance means to endure something's presence without succumbing to its influence. If you have a definition for tolerance, it would mean to endure its presence but not succumb to its influence. That's what tolerance means. When you tolerate something, that's what you're doing. The thing will hang around you, but you will not be influenced by it, right? So that's what it means, right? So that's what tolerance means. And now you can ask that, oh, it's a very confusing situation. What should I tolerate? What should I not tolerate? So the basic essence is that tolerance, and we'll talk about tolerance also further on, so I won't go into detail here unless you have any questions around it. But so tolerance is a virtue that lets us keep small things small so that we can focus on big things. Tolerance is not about keeping big things small, right? So Pandavas, the 5 Pandava brothers, they exhibit tolerance in many different ways. When Bhima was poisoned when he was young, they were exiled to the forest. They were sent to a house which was made of lac and it was burned down. They just tolerated it. They just moved out of that situation, right? They just said, okay, that's okay, we'll tolerate the situation, and they just kept on going. But when their wife was dishonored, Draupadi was dishonored, they didn't just tolerate that. They were ready to fight a war for it. So now they changed the situation. They stood up and changed the situation. And last but not the least, when they realized that Krishna had left this planet Earth, what did the Pandavas do? They walked away from this whole, they just left everything. And they renounced everything and went to the forest. So that was the third thing they did. They didn't run away, they walked away. There's a significant difference between that, right? So there was not an immediate impulsive reaction of just running away from everything. It was an intelligent, thought out decision they made of walking away from everything, because that's the way they couldn't just tolerate that Krishna had left this world, left this planet. So there are different ways in which he had to deal with tolerance, right? So to know when to doubt and when to give the benefit of doubt, we need to see our relationships as opportunities to serve the Lord, right? And we are supposed to serve we are supposed to do our service with tolerance and vigilance, right? So what it means is that vigilance means that you shouldn't tolerate everything. If it is detrimental to your bhakti, you should not tolerate it. But if you feel that this doesn't matter to my bhakti, you just let go of it, right? Lord Ram, another example. Lord Ram, he heard the words of Kekai. He took Kekai's word as destiny, and he just went to the forest. But then abduction of Sita was not something he just sat down and lamented upon, right? He fought a war. When League of Devotees, Prabhupada created a League of Devotees in India, it didn't work in Jhansi. Prabhupada walked away from it. When Prabhupada came to the United States, he would live with this person called Dr. Mishra, and you can read all these stories in the Amrita. He used to live with a person called Dr. Mishra, and Dr. Mishra was an impersonalist, and he had all the philosophy jumbled up in his mind for some nonsense, right? Dr. Mishra knew Prabhupada was a hardcore, he knew the concept very well, but then that Dr. Mishra thought that Dr. Mishra didn't let Prabhupada speak, and Prabhupada tolerated it. But when Prabhupada had his own organization, he didn't tolerate things, he corrected. If we have an intention to serve, we'll get the guidance how to serve best in a situation. We all have to choose our battles, right? We all have limited time and energy. When things go wrong beyond human control, there's nothing to regret. Right? Sometimes we try to change things and they don't change, and then we take it as our destiny, right? So you have to understand the difference between tolerance and passivity. Passivity, yes, passivity. Right? So in essence, what I'm conveying here is tolerance is meant to do focused devotion and not be affected by smaller things. Right? That's the important part. So whenever you have any doubts in life, always question yourself, is this going to help my bhakti or not? If you feel that it's affecting your bhakti, you have full authority to go away, to change that situation, right? And you don't have to tolerate it. But if you feel that it's not going to affect your bhakti, you just tolerate it and let it go. Let small things be small. Like Bruce Lee once said that you have to be like water. That's the strongest element in this creation. Water can pass through anything. You create a wall and the water says, oh, I see a small crack there, and the water just passes through it, right? So that's the way we have to be like water. So if tolerance is obstructing in doing the big things, it can become counterproductive. So that's why we should know when to be tolerant, when not to be tolerant, and more broadly, we should know our purpose. The purpose gives us perspective, right? So three things: either you tolerate it, you change the situation, or you move away from it, walk away from it, right? If we are tolerating and feeling miserable, it is not purposeful. It's going to affect your bhakti for sure. Right? So think it from that perspective. I'll take a pause here. Any thoughts, any questions, any comments? Really silent crowd. Silent audience. Nothing? One last one. Okay. So then we'll go on to the verse number 12. Then that Krishna started speaking, and now he's telling that never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So our Krishna starts by stressing on the eternality of soul and its individuality. Right? I am a soul first of all thing, and that soul is eternal, and then it's an individual. Whereas, contrastingly, the Mayavadi concept is that we all go and merge in Krishna. I'm just looking if Prabhupada talks about that. Yes, he talks about it here. So Prabhupada is telling us the Mayavadi philosophy is that after liberation, the individual soul separated by the covering of Maya will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence. And that concept is not supported here by Krishna as a supreme authority. So that's the Mayavadi concept, right? That when we leave this body, we go and merge with the Brahman, and even when Krishna comes to this material world, he's also under illusion. That's what the Mayavadis say. So, and that concept is being refuted here by Krishna. So, somebody can come and say to you, many years ago, I met this person who told me that, Krishna had also so many faults. He was also full of defects. And, that is why Bhagavad Gita is not perfect. There is something beyond Bhagavad Gita. And when I read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita more carefully, I realized that how the Mayavadis are merely just licking the honey bottle from outside. That's what they're doing. They never get to taste the honey. Because if Krishna is under illusion, then why should we even hear Bhagavad Gita? For thousands of years, intelligent people have been reading and applying Bhagavad Gita in their lives. So the concept that Mayavadis are presenting is completely false and baseless. Verse number 12, and Prabhupada, I think, yes, he brings this out, right? He talks of the honey example that I gave, that there's a slight bees licking the honey on the bottle. They're not getting inside it. Okay, comes the most important, another important verse. Tehino asmin yatha dehe, kaumaram yauvanam jara, tatha dehantara praptir, dhiras tatrana muhyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth, youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body of death. A sober person is not bewildered by such functions. To prove that the soul exists. Soul is indestructible, so Arjun, go ahead and fight. This is the answer to Arjun saying that my relatives will die. Right? So when we say to a growing child, right, that he has grown so much, we are referring to the changes in the body, not the soul. And if you have a Bhagavad Gita, you might have seen there's a photograph that Prabhupada, there's a painting that Prabhupada wanted in there that shows our life cycle. We are as a baby, as a toddler, teenager, young man, old and die. That's the changes in the body. But then the soul never changes, right? So as a continuum, the soul never dies. It's very much akin to this, and over time, when we read Bhagavad Gita, we get this uncanny awareness that my body is changing, but I am not. It's very much like when you are in a Zoom call, right? When you go into a Zoom call, they make these rooms that you can go in. There are different rooms you can go in. I think they're called rooms. Yes, it's rooms. You can go into different rooms, and you go into one room. You're there for a couple of minutes, and then bloop, you're in another room, right? So you keep moving rooms, but you don't change. You're the same person. Similarly, so if you look at that same analogy, we have also been going back and forth in different rooms, but then I have never changed. I'm the same person who went into all these different rooms and discussed many different things. So the same way, Dehinosmin yatha dehi kaumaram yoganam jana. This body also changes over time, but then I am never changing. Science has proven that every 7 years, every single cell of my body has changed. So practically every 7 years, we have a new body. Right? So that's the essence of this verse. Right? You are not this body. First lesson given in Bhagavad. The first life-affirming message is that biology is not destiny, if you look at it from that perspective. Life extends far beyond the mortality of this body. Our material bodies are just external shells, temporary houses that we are living in. And during this multi-life journey, or through this multi-room journey in a Zoom meeting, we are just passing through. And as souls, we all have this capacity, this capability to access and relish eternal happiness at the spiritual level. We all have this capacity. So that's this verse, very important verse here. Again, Prabhupada highlights the Mayavadi theory. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. So the Mayavadis, as I was saying, they say that the soul goes and merges in the infinite. But that's being refuted here. The soul can never be cut into pieces. It can never be dissolved or anything. Nothing that's happening. So that's why the Mayavadi theory is baseless. Prabhupada is highlighting that for us. So this is okay. And I'm just hoping that all of you read a few verses whenever we come to this class. I don't say it every time, but I just request you whenever you're coming, just know which verse you finished on, to read the next 15 or so verses. Approximately, that's what we'll be covering every time. Because I cannot go through everything in the purport, but those purports are very, very important for us to understand Bhagavad Gita. I can highlight a few sections here and there that I feel are important, but obviously I'm not an expert. I will surely miss many things everywhere. So I just humbly request you, please read verses before you come to the class. And I assure you, there'll be so many things that you will realize. Why is Prabhupada saying this? What does he mean by that? Why did he say that? You'll have so many questions. Okay, 14th verse. Matra sparshas tu konteya sitoshna sukha dukkha agamapainyo nityas tam titikshava bharata. We talked about titikshava. Titikshava is, Prabhupada will translate titikshava as tolerate, just try to tolerate. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O Scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Prabhupada gives beautiful examples. Just similarly, a woman who does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May, June, the hottest part of the summer. Similarly, people don't shy away from taking baths in the month of March, which is January and February, even though it's very cold. They take bath in cold water. Why? Because they're just trying to tolerate it. They're trying to tolerate the non-permanentness of this creation. And these are beautiful examples from our day-to-day life, right? In India, it gets blistering hot, at least in Delhi, where I am from, it gets blistering hot, 47 or so degrees centigrade. Still, women don't hesitate to cook for their families. So that's what Krishna is telling Arjuna here, that just tolerate all this. Don't try to get entangled in this, right? So we just talked about Krishna talking about how the soul is permanent, and he talked about that your soul, you're changing bodies, but your soul is permanent. So in this verse now, Krishna is giving an application of those verses. Because everything you are seeing, the duality is on a bodily platform. Just learn to tolerate it because you are not that body. So it's an application of verse 13 that we read. Dehinosmin yatha dehi. So matra sparsha means contact of senses to the sense objects. And what does it lead to? Sitoshna sukha dukkha. Pain and happiness, heat and cold. And what is that nature of that matra sparshas? Agama painyu anityas. It comes and goes. Just like sukha is temporary, dukkha is also temporary, right? Isn't that a relief to hear that even dukkha is also temporary? You know, you must have heard the story about Akbar and Birbal, that once in Akbar's court, Akbar, somebody comes and challenges Akbar, and intellectually he says that, give me one sentence that will make a happy person sad and a sad person happy. Okay, so Arjun and Akbar asked Birbal to solve that riddle. And Birbal writes that this too shall pass. So whatever situation you are in, it will pass. You are happy, your happiness will go away. You're sad, your sadness will go away. So it's going to just tolerate it. Right? In the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Narad Muni speaks this word. He's saying that he says that everything is coming to us. Sukha and dukkha are coming as a part of our destiny. Right? I never sat down and asked for sorrow to come to my life. It just shows up one day, knocks on my door and shows up. Similarly, happiness just knocks on my door and shows up. My contribution to that is insignificant. Right? So there's a verse in the 4th canto. Taseva heto prayateta kovido na labhyate brahma upriyata. Talabhyate dukhva danyata sukham kalena sarvatra kabhirahansa. That's the verse I was thinking about. Yes, and so what Dalmuni tells us is that you are getting happiness and sorrow as a matter of destiny. So don't try to struggle for it in the material world. Struggle for what you can get by your hard work. That is spiritual happiness. Right? So work for that. Don't work for material, because happiness and sorrow is coming and going for sure. Right? So when we become tolerant, we'll be able to do our duties both on the material plane and also on the spiritual plane. It's 8:30. I'll take a pause here. I don't want to keep on doing this more. I want to talk about it this verse, but I'll just pause here. We can continue here. Any last minute thoughts from anyone?
Prabhuji, you had mentioned you will send after each chapter the open book questions that we can do.
Yeah, I'll send you one this week for the first chapter. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Anyone? Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining in. We'll get back again next week.